And welcome back, everybody. It is another episode of the Catholic Convert Show. I'm here as usual. Ed is here every once in a while. I don't know, he's going to develop that habit of just taking a couple of days off per week in his geriatric state. But we're here today, and we're going to have a special guest. As usual, you've noticed almost at the end of every single episode, we always talk about holy habits and how it's the best Catholic habit tracker out there. Well, today, the man himself, the creator / co-founder of Holy Habits, is going to join us on the show. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him into the studio so he can say hello. Everyone, this is Drago Dimitrov. Drago, welcome to the show, brother.
Jeff, Ed, thanks for having me. As a fellow Catholic convert myself, what better place to be than the Catholic Convert Show?
Okay, that was way better than what I had in mind for like intros. So I might have to get you to do kind of the sports announcer opening monologue for the show from now on. That'd be awesome.
Hey, man, either that or the AI generated Catholic convert song.
Yeah, but if I do that, I got to have the movie guy. In a world where godlessness has run rampant.
Absolutely. Yeah, with like the big horizon sunshine, full IMAX experience.
Yeah, that'll work. Ed's over here going, I don't know what IMAX is.
Yeah, I was already in retirement before that came up. So
yeah, sounds about right. But man, it's good to have you on the show. You know, we talk about your app every single day. And I think it's awesome that when I first brought it up on the show, Ed immediately said, all right, I'm going to download it and use it. Now he's getting those annoying text reminders before bed every day. Oh, nope, can't go to bed yet. Got to do this. I'm getting them immediately after we're done recording. Have you done this today? Because I got mine coming in the middle of the afternoon. So you and I have talked privately before, and you kind of know a bit of my backstory. Most people who watch this show, read my newsletter, follow me online, they know a little bit of my backstory, if not all of it at this point. They know Ed's because he's cradle Byzantine Catholic. Oh, he was born swinging a thurible. And it was a thurible on the end of the umbilical is what it was. But you, surprisingly, I've seen you making all of these like trips around the Catholic speaker circuit. I've seen you on several different podcasts and shows. And you started off as a Protestant just like me. So everybody wants to know how that happened and how you're now running the Catholic circuit, hitting all the cool names in the Catholic space, and have developed one of the best Catholic habit trackers out there.
Well, yeah, we could dive right into it. I appreciate the framing there. It's been a great community on X in particular, as y'all have noticed yourselves. There's really a movement, and there's something brewing. I mean, I think the fact that we're getting such a surge in Catholic energy maybe is meant to prepare us for some of the darker times in society ahead. Who knows? But anyway, yeah, it's interesting what's happening. So. Yeah, I mean, should I go into it, the origin story?
Yeah, why not?
All right.
We ain't got nothing else better to do.
Hey, let's do it. So I was born in Bulgaria, hence the name Drago. And I actually don't usually think about this as part of my story, but technically I was baptized Eastern Orthodox just because, you take the baby and that's what you did, even though a lot of people are atheists in Europe. So it doesn't really mean too much culturally speaking, but moved to the United States when I was 5. My parents split, but both of them came to the United States through the Disney on Ice traveling show. My mom was not an ice skater. Instead, they were selling concession stands, snow cones, toys, all this stuff, even though she had these like master's degrees and things. So we were coming to America. was she looking for a better life, or did she want to leave her Bulgaria life, at the time, to be determined? So we settled into, I was living in hotel to hotel for like 6 months on the road straight when I first came, because the show was traveling, and obviously that wasn't sustainable. And so my mother, we ended up narrowing in, planting our stake in South Bend, Indiana, Midwest, like an hour and a half away from Chicago, but, cornfields, pure Americana, let's say. And so quickly, because in the public school system, it was kind of like dangerous, where like kids were getting stabbed with pencils or something. I don't know. So she's just like, oh, here's a nice Christian school. And she wasn't a Christian at the time, but by God's grace, I went into, there's a K-12 Christian school, to set that stage. And it, K-12 Christian school, graduating class of 14 kids, 1-4, like super small, man. I mean, everyone is in your business. Like you couldn't really do anything without someone knowing about it. And so to give you the context there, I mean, you got Bible class every day. We got chapel. And I guess before I talk about the shift, let me give homage to that experience, because I do believe I knew Jesus Christ intimately through my time. I had great mentors, learning his word, all these things. I led worship. I even got involved in like the local mega church, like 3,000 people with the freaking fog machines and the lights, and that flavor of Christianity as a camp counselor. And so one of the best things that school did is they had a worldview class. So there's the Christian worldview, the postmodern, the atheist. And in junior high, so if you see me doing all this apologetic stuff now, probably a lot of the seeds were planted because this small school helped equip me. And hopefully, around the world, like around the country, people who are listening, that their schools could do the same thing, or if they homeschool, because the worldview education, I think, is so important. But anyway, so how would I describe this? So because it was a 14-kid graduating class, I didn't really have a career in my mind. I didn't really have a vision. I barely studied for those tests, the SATs. And I was just like, you know what? I think I'm going to be a pastor. I'm going to be a pastor, or if that doesn't work out, some motivational speaker, because I must be some pretty awesome guy. And or if not that, I'm going to be a professional poker player, because I had my little Poker Stars account at 16 and was doing that stuff. So,
what a wild, hey, I can be a pastor or I could be a pro poker player. Two completely opposite ends of the spectrum there. That's great.
But you know what? If I'm disconnected from apostolic succession, why can't I start a poker church? I'm sure there's some kind of doctrine and denomination I can do with that.
Maybe the Calvinists. That's them, right?
Yes, Calvinists. So that's
the Reformed Baptists. Yeah, there we go.
Didn't the Baptists just have a conference? Why didn't they talk about poker? That should have been an issue.
Yeah,
I had. Not to diverge. I had poker nights in my house, and I remember I set the alarm bells off for the youth pastors, where they felt like they had to explain if gambling is a sin or not, and what are the anyway. So that was a separate thing. To be clear, man, I was a pretty straight shooting person, like all things considered. Yeah, I didn't get involved in drugs and all this stuff. But in my school, because I listened to the pop radio, secular, some rap, those kids were kind of like the bad kids, like that was the cutoff. If you were listening to the music you weren't supposed to, you're already, people are already looking at you funny. So
makes sense.
Anyway, so the school, Baptist, actually, even though they didn't push it, they were Baptist. My mega church was Methodist, so I was already getting a couple different flavors. They had the pastors get swapped out. So speaking of Calvinists, around high school, we had a strong Reformed Calvinist type of mindset come in. And that began, I started wondering, I had this new system being imposed because I wasn't Calvinist, but now maybe I should be Calvinist because they're telling me that this is the right way to do things, the right way to read things. Anyway, what I'll describe here in the shift is, if I had to tighten it up, is it's a realization that what I thought was obvious was not so obvious. So even as a Protestant, before I started looking at Catholicism, when we talk about Calvinism, I realized these debates, the Calvinist versus the Arminian, right? They were so certain that their interpretation of the Bible was the correct one. The other ones were wrong. And I started to struggle with that. I'm like, And then also the other dimension, as a Protestant, where Catholics, I did not think about Catholicism, sexual ethics. Protestants couldn't agree about what does fornication mean? You know, can you have sex if you're single, haven't been married? You know, how does masturbation, you know, sorry for the list, how does all that play into the sexual ethics were so fuzzy depending on who you talk to. So already I'm like, this is kind of strange that we don't have clarity, but that was just brewing. So anyway, my mother, she ended up getting a job at Notre Dame. And I felt, you know, the obligatory, let me just throw in an application. This isn't a school I care about. Like it doesn't fit with being a pastor or a poker player. So why go to Notre Dame? And then I got the acceptance letter. And I opened it up. And I think most people would be like, oh, this is great, right? Like, thank God. I remember praying to God, and like my heart sunk in my chest. Like I had this weighty thing. I'm like, God, are you sure you want me to go to a non-Christian school? Is that really what you want me to do? So before I pause there, the whole point is I thought Catholics weren't real Christians. It was the whole, they're going to work their way to Christ. They're rejecting relationship with Christ. They're going to sin all week, live like heathens, and just, hey, confess to my priest. I get a refresh. Let's sin again this week, and I'll just go to confession. And I had the typical straw man, but straw man is too light of a word. It's very pejorative understanding of Catholics. And I didn't even know any Catholics. So anyway, that's the first bit.
When you first told me that story about how, like, I wasn't even sure if God wanted me to go to a non-Christian school, talking about Notre Dame, it cracked me up, and it still does. Because, I mean, look, I grew up Protestant, and I don't think I knew any Catholics until I was in high school. And it was a friend who he went to the Baptist church, but his parents were in a mixed faith marriage. His mom was Baptist, went to our church, and his dad was Catholic. And so what they would do is his dad would sometimes go to the Protestant services. And then I'm like, well, why is your dad not here half the Sundays? He goes, oh, he's Catholic, and I won't be here next week because I'm going to church with him. You can come if you want to. And so that was like the first time I ever saw, you know, a Catholic church. And I'm like, this is kind of weird. You know, never seen a church like this. And I got my first taste of the Catholic fitness routine: stand up, sit down, walk to the front, take a shot, turn around, walk back. You know, I got to see all that. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's why there's all thin people in here, because it's definitely an active church, you know. But yeah, I was the same way. I didn't see any Catholics, you know, in my small town of, like, I don't know, 2,000 people here in South Carolina. I know Ed, though. He's the standalone over there. I've seen the pictures of him in the 70s at the school, getting pictures taken with the Sisters of St. John Chrysostom, and I'm like, man, it looks like it was taken in the 1800s, but they just couldn't afford color film.
Brutal, man, brutal. Ed, you doing good getting all those shots?
It was actually the Sisters of St. Basil the Great.
Ah, Sisters of St. Basil the Great, right.
It's every day. But they were the Sisters of St. Basil the Great. Yes. So, and it was the early 1900s, not the late 1800s.
So he got to grow up knowing what Catholicism was about, and which I'm kind of jealous of that too. I really wish I'd grown up in a Catholic household, because having only converted, 14 months ago, my biggest regret is, why didn't I do it sooner? Because I met my wife 20 years ago. We've been together 2 decades, and she's always been Catholic. And it just was never something that I decided to even really cared about. Now I'm like, man, I wish I had of.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, God's grace works in mysterious ways, and either you were a stubborn for 20 years, or maybe it happened at just the right time, right?
But that's where I'm jealous of Ed over there. He's got all the cool collectibles down in his creepy basement, and 2, he cradle Catholic, been through it all.
That is correct.
And he's one of the only cradle Catholics that I've ever met that has as broad and in-depth of an understanding of the Catholic faith as these new zealous converts do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, because our zealous convert badge is like, we're supposed to be the best Catholics. Converts make the best Catholics. But as some would say, we're all converts, even cradle Catholics. And so, yeah, for sure. Nice to hear that about you, Ed, because even as a Protestant, anytime someone said Catholic, it was always this like, it's some cultural identity. Oh, Catholics, but it's like they don't go to church. Like so the word Catholic didn't have this power that you see in people who were actually champions of Catholicism, which is just unmatched. So all that to say,
and I've said this to Jeff before that, like some of the best apologists we have are converts. Guys like Scott Hahn and Jeff Cavins and Steve Ray and Tim Staples, and it goes on and on and on. So some of the reputation of Catholics is deserved. If you are a cradle Catholic, typically you don't know your faith as well as you should, or at least I don't think they do. So I'm happy to be one of the exceptions to that rule. But I grew up in a household where our faith was extremely important. I don't know if it had something to do with being Byzantine Catholic, but feeling like we grew up feeling like we were the underdogs, because we're, I think it's 98.6% of Catholics fall under the Western Church, and then like 1% of us that are Eastern, and the Byzantines being the largest segment of them. So we had to learn not only about our own faith, but the faith of our brother and sister Catholics, so that if conversation ever came up, I would be able to hold my own. So maybe that had something to do with it. And Jeff, today I'm pretty much, I guess you would call me bi-ritual, because I attend multiple Catholic churches, both rites, and I teach CCD and Bible study and things like that at both the Eastern and Western churches. So that's my history there. But I think the tide's turning a little bit, and I think we're getting to a point where a lot more cradle Catholics are wanting to know about their faith and wanting to have a better understanding of it. So hopefully that's a trend that's going to continue.
Absolutely. And I went to a Byzantine Eastern Rite last year, and I absolutely loved it. And in fact, I'm very drawn to it, and it's something I personally want to keep exploring on my journey as well. So I'd love to learn more from you sometime on that topic, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a Greek Orthodox church here. Matter of fact, I know there is, because we always have the Greek Fest always at the church, and it's always awesome food, cool crowds, great people, And us Catholics, we love our Orthodox brothers and sisters. We absolutely love them. So the people and the clergy from my parish always push everybody from our parish to go over there, check them out, say hello, meet and greet, hang out with them, enjoy the good time. So you're in Notre Dame, you get accepted to Notre Dame. How did the slow crawl to Catholicism begin? Because now you're at this non-Christian school, you're at this house of the cultists of the Catholics, and you have no idea what they believe. So how did you end up starting that? Because you had everything kind of brewing, like you said, just because of the weird conflicting ideologies between like Calvinism and Methodist and Baptist reforms and all this other. So how did you actually get into the Catholic state of mind, as it were?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And now looking back on it, to your point, Jeff, where you said, 20 years, I even have regret not accessing some of those incredible Catholic resources during my full time at Notre Dame. For example, the daily dorm masses. Bro, you could just get up out of bed, walk down 2 flights of stairs to take the Eucharist. Like, I cannot believe I didn't utilize that. Like that actually really sucks when I think about it now. But I didn't know. What did I know? So I would say, it was a 6-year journey. I mean, because I was already so methodical about worldview, why do I believe what I believe, who am I, whatever. I wasn't just going to convert overnight. No way. One step at a time, one pillar. It's like I wasn't going to dive in the pool. It's like, ooh, is the water warm? Oh, okay, cool. Like I'll take another step. And each step, I, in some sense, thought I was going to refute the Catholic Church. Like, all right, married. What's this Mary stuff? And like, oh, well, that's not that bad. Makes sense. Oh, the Pope. So there's all these layers intellectually, and that's one track to discuss. There's the psychological components and the emotional components as well. So to comment on those. And hey, let me know. Can you guys? It looks like there's some people in a conference room over there. Let me know if there's any background noise, and I can I'll relocate. But
oh no, you're good.
Perfect. So for starters, I was behind enemy lines, right? I was behind enemy lines, getting to know these people. Even some secular stuff, like I got hazed. I was like one of the last cohorts to get hazed, which was actually pretty cool. It wasn't like some of the weird stuff you hear about. But yet hazing got banned after my cohort because some people cried to their parents. But anyway, I digress. It was a different culture than my little small Christian school, 14. But part of the hazing, by the way, you crawl through the mud and then you walk through this fountain and you get baptized and join the brotherhood. It was pretty cool. But I digress. So there's a strong sense of brotherhood. I talked with a lot of people and I realized, like, okay, some of these people love Jesus. Like, I don't really agree with the stuff, but their heart is there. So, that's interesting. So it's not that all Catholics aren't Christians. Like, you know what? I think some of these Catholics are probably Christians. They're just a little confused. So that's like, yeah. So that's like step one in the shift. Also, each dorm had a priest who live in there, and they'd host gatherings to just chill, discuss, grab pizza, whatever. And so one of the priests, to hang out. He was always cool, answer my questions. He helped me on career stuff as well, internships. Now, here's something, I don't know if I should even disclose it, because technically it's probably heretical. I think, the Catholic Church would probably have to kick him out for doing this. But when I started getting intrigued, because I thought the mystical stuff was cool, even some of the Eastern mindfulness, whatever, like that's where I was dabbling in that. So I'm like, Eucharist, like Christ being there, that's a cool belief. Whether it's true or not, I kind of want to act as if that's true. Like I'm kind of into this vibe, like Jesus there, like that's mystical. That's so cool, right? So I would go to these dorm masses, and the priest, he actually would let me partake in the Eucharist, which is a big no-no because I wasn't a Catholic. But I don't want to say that to endorse that behavior, because you probably shouldn't do that. But for me, it actually kind of, God's grace worked in a strange way there, even just being exposed to the Eucharist. So there's that dimension. I also started, back with like the philosophy, like I started to ask, like, do I care about history? Do I care about history? I did not, because I had my small church, Main Street. They got the word of God. They love Jesus. What else do you need? What else do you need, church? We got the Lord. So did it really matter? Was this church started 50 years ago by this, that? So I had to ask myself, well, if I was alive 1,000 years ago, what's the probability that my current inventory of beliefs, everything that I believe today, all the Christian doctrines that Drago believes, what's the probability that Drago living in the year 1000 would completely agree? It's kind of like when the atheist says, well, what if you were born in the Middle East? Would you be a Christian, right? It's the same type of question. So Protestant, if you were born in a different time period, what's the probability you would believe the exact same doctrines? Like zero. There's just no way I would have believed the same thing. So now I have to say there's a difference. Now I make a value judgment. Well, which one's better? If I don't know which one's better, do I want to bet that the people closer to Jesus had it right and then maybe we strayed? Or they were wrong, like those misguided people. I feel bad for the first 1,000 years, but now I'm more enlightened. I'm more enlightened now. So that was a seed that planted in my head. I'm like, oh, dang, like if I'm going to be a Protestant, the consequences is I have to look down. I have to lift my nose up on history. So I better be for sure about what I believe. Number one. Number two, the things that I thought were obvious were not so obvious. All of a sudden I realized, well, wait a minute, I believe in the Trinity. It seems like the reason I do is because the church established that as the official interpretation. We know about Arianism, Jesus Christ, divinity. Even though where the Bible came, right? It's like, there's things that I believe that aren't in the Bible. That's a scary thought. I don't want to think about that. But I don't like that thought. So, I started kind of being intrigued, going from a place of dogmatic certainty to, I'm a Protestant. I think Catholics are wrong. But maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something there. And then I got this book by Peter Kreeft, Dr. Peter Kreeft, as I'm sure you guys know. And for those listening, he used to be Protestants, wrote the book. He's written a lot of books. He wrote the Handbook of Christian Apologetics, one of the best apologetics resources. And I love my apologetics resources, man, right? So, but then when he became a Catholic through his wife, he republished the book entitled it Handbook of Catholic Apologetics. Same book, but he added an extra little chapter at the end, which is 20 capstones for Catholics to Protestants, or for Protestants about Catholicism. So I popped those open. And of course, you can get into some of that. But after reading that section, I'm like, Catholics have a self-consistent system. It actually fits the pieces. If you buy into their assumptions, the Catholic system holds. It's not my system. Look, I'm a Protestant, but I respect now. Now I have respect that if a Catholic, their system works. I don't buy into it, but it actually works. There's no contradictions. There's no fundamental problems. The machine works. It's just not the machine that I want to drive. And so, but the key point from that journey I want to say is the role of the body. And actually, Jeff, you wrote a great blog post on this, so I won't speak too much on that, but I want to point out how, as a Protestant, the flesh is so bad, the body. And of course, sin is bad, but the flesh is not this. Like, this is actually kind of good. Like, God created the bodies. He didn't create us to be angelic beings. These are good things. He said it was good. He did the incarnation, which said the body was good. I mean, if the body was bad, why would Jesus have a body? It doesn't make any sense. And so this concept of the physical interaction with Christ through the sacraments, that started to have some kind of intuitive appeal. And in the Old Testament, like, that's the other strange thing. God, this same God had these Old Testament folks, do the sacrifices, throw the blood, eat stuff like incense, go to the temple. Okay, cool. But in the New Testament, he's just like, nah, guys, that was just kind of like a fun little performance thing. And just close your eyes. Like, this is how you worship me. We're just kind of going to hang out. And very strange. Like, is this not the same God? If God was very particular about how he wanted to be worshipped, maybe he's particular still about how he wants to be worshipped. So there's some, I'll pause briefly here because there's other dimensions, but that's kind of what started, peeling the door back a little bit. That got me curious.
There's a very St. Thomas Aquinas-esque vibe to your conversion. Very logical. That's how Thomas Aquinas proved the existence of God in his writings. It was through a series of logical developments where the system, the machine, worked. It kind of reminds me of what's that old game, Mousetrap? Where you had to build the different contraptions and then you'd send the little thing through it, and okay, it works. It'll capture the mouse at the end. It works. And anytime something didn't fit, he wanted to go and make sure that throughout, the church, the fathers of the church, scripture, sacred tradition, and the basic fundamental theology still fit. And when everything still fit in there, it caught the mouse. And I've noticed there's kind of something very similar to yours as well. You went, all right, hold on, let's plug and play. Does it fit? Okay, everything fits. And it does that to a point where Catholicism is the most common sense deduction when you look at Christianity, because it has to make sense. It can't have contradictions. It can't have these gotchas or anything like that. And the exact opposite of that was what led me away from the Protestant church. It was, I remember I had this one newsletter blog that I wrote probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it was called Finding Gods, small g, the S was in parentheses. And it was, I looked at it as you have to be absolutely arrogant as a mere human to say, my interpretation of what the Bible says is correct. My interpretation of, I don't know the name of it, but the Hindu ancient scriptures, or the Shinto, or whatever it is from Buddhism, or any of the old Greek, Roman pantheons, Nordic pantheons. You have to be very arrogant to say, I know this one is correct because that's what I believe it to be. And that's what led me away from Protestantism. And I had the same assumption that Catholicism was just another denomination, because I never dug into it. I never questioned it, didn't really care. And that's what led me to, well, I'm just a whatever. And I was a practicing pagan for a while, right? Because you could choose your own gods. You get these, you can pick and pull and play and find attributes and features, as it were, that suit you and your world belief. And again, it wasn't until years later, last year, that I went, oh, okay, I'm probably wrong. But so that got the ball rolling for you. That kind of led you up to it. What was the defining moment when you said, I'm going to become a Catholic?
Yeah, well, great point. So let me, leading up to that, let me throw in some of the emotional layers here because they're relevant too. So one of the struggles was emotionally, because look, I had real experiences with God and Jesus Christ, like, even like things that you couldn't explain as a Protestant. So I firmly, I'm like, I had a real faith. So one of the struggles when I was praying to God is like, God, if I admit that Catholicism is true, am I somehow blaspheming the real relationship I've had with you? And he told me, Drago, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you pursue the truth, it's always going to point you to me. So just take an honest pursuit of truth. Nothing bad is going to happen. Like, unless you're scared of being deceived, but don't worry. Like, you can think through things. Don't worry. Like, you're not going to be deceived. Like, just explore the stuff. Don't jump back into, confirmation bias and all these other things. So, okay, I met my Notre Dame girl, right, in 2014. So when I was a junior, started dating, and she was nominally Catholic growing up, and then she got confirmed at university. But anyway, when we were going to get married, she's like, well, I want to get married in the Catholic Church. And I said, fine, but look, we're going to raise our son Protestant. We're not going to do this 50-50 thing that you just talked about, Jeff. We're going to be going to our, Protestant church, Bible church, but I'll do the Catholic ceremony. Sure, why not? So, did the second part of RCIA, because I didn't need to do the first part because I know who God is. Come on, hello, but no. So I did the RCIA. Priests, just the aura of the priests, the gentleness, the way they answered my questions, even when I was like skeptical about stuff. That's when confession started to make sense to me. Then pre-Cana. So the beauty dimension. So, going through the Catholic courses on marriage and the real depth and the sacrament. So there's a little bit of that starting to trigger, like, wow, this is getting pretty beautiful. While also even the ritualistic stand up, sit down, all this kind of stuff that Protestants laugh at, where at first I hated it because I was used to the charismatic improv pastor who's just going to 45 minutes wheeling and dealing. Let's go, and then you're amped up. And then now it's like the complete opposite. No, I want the ritual, the stability, whatever happens this week, it's getting into that flow. And so all these things were just in the works God was changing within me. But so that being said, when I was getting married and then confirmed, I was straddling. At that point, I was 50-50. I'm like, God, I don't know. Some of this Catholic stuff makes more sense to me. I'm not really Catholic yet. I haven't worked all this stuff out yet. I'm not sure about the Pope. That was like a pillar. And then the faith works thing, I even saved that because I knew I had so much defensiveness against salvation and faith. I didn't even want to because I was almost scared that would make me not Catholic again. So I tackled all the other stuff first. Mary, even the Pope. I read Pope fiction, and even reading Matthew 16 in the exegesis with the keys. I'm like, dude, I took Bible class. I read the Bible. How did we just skip that part? Did my Protestant people, we did? I remember hearing this one pastor, maybe it was Driscoll or something. He said that his interpretation of Matthew 16 was that Jesus was a jokester doing comedy saying, Peter, you're a Rocky. Ha ha, you're so reliable, but I know you're going to betray me. See, Jesus is a funny guy. And so anyway, these are the kinds of analysis I had on the pro-Catholic passages. It just somehow didn't have any of that. Anyway, so I know your question was more direct. When was the defining moment? That's the thing. Was it a one defining moment? Or again, it was this shift into ambiguity. And then at that point, maybe it was a leap of faith where I haven't figured out all the doctrines, but I feel the pull. I'm getting confirmed. And then God just continues to work the grace there. Oh, one more pillar. Sorry, this pillar is important. I know I'm a rambler and I apologize for that, guys, but I hope it's valuable. On the beauty dimension, popping open the catechism. All right, so if any Protestants who are listening here, just put the sword and the shield down for a second. No one's asking to become a Catholic right now. Open up Catechism, Life in Christ. Just read that section. And you can stay at being a Protestant, whatever, right? Yeah, but Life in Christ, it has the 10 commandments, right? Each one has a section. And within each commandment, it's a drill in how to live a good life in a holiness. And even when we talk about habits, right? These things for example, on lying, right? Everyone's, don't lie. It's like, okay, well, I don't lie. So that commandment, I'm done, right? I guess I keep the commandments. Well, hold on a second. There's all these ideas of unconditional love of truth, detraction. So sometimes you can tell a truth that makes somebody seem negative. It makes someone less attractive, even though you're pointing out the truth. Well, that can still be a sin. Oh, So all these principles is very clear, pristine. There's no ambiguity about how to live a Christ-like life. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to feel the Spirit and I'm just going to start being a good person. Like unconsciously, it's like I'm just going to wake up and I'm a patient guy all of a sudden, right? Like the process of sanctification, I somehow thought it was this unconscious thing where I just get to float around as if the Spirit's going to possess me and I'm just going to be this great guy, right? So that, and it related to that, the virtue of prudence. And I promise that's the last piece. The virtue of prudence. So the idea of a systematized way of asking what is the right thing to do. Our culture doesn't ask that. When we don't ask that, we're guilty of rash judgment. Okay, now I've asked what is the right thing to do. I need to decide. I need to make a decision. If I don't make a decision, I'm guilty of being indecisive. And I have to follow through. If I don't follow through and execute the plan, I'm guilty of being inconstant. So that just systematized way of like very practical. Jeff, you said common sense. That's what it is. It's an integration with the daily life of what it's like to be a human being on God's earth and bring the kingdom. Before those things were disconnected, as a Protestant, there was overlap. It just didn't fully integrate. So again, to answer your question, enough of the barriers were getting peeled away to where I was straddling both. Then because I did the confirmation, leap of faith, then all of a sudden 60-40. All right, I'm in the Catholic way. I have faith, I'll figure it out. Every time I try to take down the church, because Drago, he's going to refute the 2,000 years church, because this church is so obviously dumb and people who believe it, but I'm going to take it down. You watch me. Drago's going to take down the Catholic Church. And then, no, every time fell back on my butt, blown away, of course, no surprise there. So then I'm like, you know what? I know the church is going to keep doing this. I see a pattern here. And I'm going to go with this pattern.
Now, I get it. Now, listen, I asked you what was the defining moment, specifically because Ed and I have talked about this on the show before. All conversion is never a defining moment. A conversion is not a moment. It is a journey. For you, it took all that time, 6 years, you said. For me, it was an 18-month journey studying scripture, writing a book with a client. And then finally, you know what, babe? Make sure the kids go to bed on time tonight because tomorrow morning we're going to wake up early and we're going to go to mass. Really? Yeah. Why? Because I said so. Do it. And been going to mass ever since, right? That was how it happened. It was, I'm just going to dive in all the way. I do not have all the answers. I'm going to go to RCIA, obviously. I'm going to learn. I'm going to study. I'm going to read, but I'm a learner by a doer. I can't become Catholic without doing Catholic things. So we're going to mass, we're going to adoration, we're going to Bible study, we're going to RCIA, we're doing all these things. Now, we've only got about 15 minutes before we start having to wrap up. So holy habits, we're going to fast forward a little bit so we can make sure we cram this in here. Holy habits. Why do people need it? Why did you create it? And what is your hope for it going forward from now?
Yes. So briefly, I've been praying for a while for an alignment of my professional interests and skills and passion for the faith. So praise God, things lined up. And so now I'm leading Holy Habits. And our ambitions for Holy Habits are, people know Hallow. We want Holy Habits to be the household name for pursuing sanctification. Am I still there with y'all? This thing, my computer did something. It must be the devil. Anytime I have technical difficulties, I'm saying it's the devil trying to get in the way of our conversation. So anyway, Holy Habits. There's the Catholic angle and then the Christian angle, but let me start home base here with our Catholic angle. So we understand that here's where we are today, and there's the saints version of us, right? Saint Jeff, Saint Ed, Saint Drago. And there's a gap. It doesn't automatically get closed. And so the problem is for a lot of us, well, what do we do? How do we take the next step forward? Like, I guess I could pray more, right? Like, you need to do that. I guess I'll try to be more patient with my wife and kid and, okay, but we need to clarify the path to sainthood for those who want to do it. Because here's the deal. We either make progress in closing the gap now, or we do it in the cleansing fire of purgatory, whatever, because we're not, there's a process. And from what I hear, it's better to do it now than it is there. So let's do what we can now to become saints. Because becoming a saint, as you point out on your show, is not for the extraordinary, really notable figures, but it's for everybody, the every man, the every woman. We need to become saints. That's our calling. And to become a saint is just to say yes to God all the time, just to love him, right? This isn't about this, strange, mystic, go be a monk type of thing. No, not at all. So we want to clarify the path to sainthood. We want to make it very clear to an individual each day, like, what's the next step? And before I answer how we do that, I'll also say the other aspect. There's a supply and demand gap of spiritual direction. So as every devout Catholic knows, spiritual direction is super important. Having a spiritual director, some other person who can kind of iron sharpen iron you, guide you in becoming holy is important. But there's not enough spiritual directors. Let me put it this way: 100 years ago, allegedly, when Ed was making the rounds, according to Jeff, right? Sorry, Ed. There was 90% of families had a spiritual director. I think everyone in the parish. Everyone had a spiritual director. Not the case now. Now it's like less than 10%. So what we're doing is we have a technological tool to help bridge that gap. It does not replace the need for a real spiritual director, but it helps augment if you already have a spiritual director, or if you can't get one, to pursue the path of holiness. How do we do that? So the simple version, how we started, was Catholic habit tracking app. You create your habits. You can join a group, an accountability group, where the group leader assigns a habit and everyone focuses on that same mission. And then we have the daily text reminders. You don't even have to open the app up. You just get a text. No other habit tracking app does that much. But then on Easter, as y'all know, we released the Holy Hub. So that's going to be the centerpiece here with all the spiritual direction. And the first feature we did for that is the automatic generation of holy habits. It identifies your root sin, pride, vanity, or sensuality. This comes from the triple concupiscence concept. We don't have to talk about that. But you have your root sin, so your tendencies, your current spiritual state in life, and then most importantly, arguably, there's a custom input box where you say, hey, I'm a father. I work in such and such industry. I'm struggling with this. These are the relationships I care about. You write that in there. And the more specific you are, the better the habits that get generated are going to be. And so then it generates for you a set of habits to work on. And most people, when they're specific, they say, this is awesome. I love these habits. If they're not sure, they show their spouse, and their spouse says, yeah, this is what you need to work on. But that being said, of course, I love the product, and I appreciate you guys for talking about it on the show. Did you like the holy habits that it generated for you?
Personally, I didn't like them because I felt seen. I was like, oh. So the whole reason Drago sent me that text message that, hey, it's ready, was because he was like, he's going to feel judged. Yeah, that was the first thing that I kind of felt. But no, I absolutely love it. Yeah, it's one of the best features. I'm really glad that finally got released.
We're going to, for those just to give a heads up too, we're also going to release monitoring of when you're in a state of grace, when you're not, if you want to. Because I know for me, I'm an idiot. If I'm in mortal sin, I know just bad things start happening. And so, keeping track of which sins, seeing how over time, we're no longer struggling with the same stuff that we've been struggling. I think it's a problem to look at your life and say, oh yeah, 10 years ago, I was struggling with the same thing. Well, as Christians, we got work to do. Once we're done getting rid of that thing, God's going to show us another way we can become more Christ-like. It's a journey. We're meant to go through the hero's journey to keep to become saints. And if we're still struggling with the same freaking thing that we did 10 years ago, something's not right about our strategy or about our approach. So anyway, so sorry to, that just popped in my head, but tracking sin and temptation, because you want to track how the devil tempts you. Like if you want to get on top of that, because we're going to track our sleep patterns, we're going to track our heart rates. Well, let's track our spiritual life and be on top of that.
Yeah, I dig it. And we're coming up on the 9-minute mark. There's been a bit of a technical difficulty on Ed's end, and there's probably a 7-second delay from the time that we finish speaking to the time that he hears it finish speaking. So Ed, as soon as you hear this, count it down 7 seconds and you can go ahead and jump in here.
Yes. And what would you like me to jump in with, Jeff? Are we? Are you counting down to 7?
Did
we?
Worked out perfect.
Every time Ed asks a question, it adds another 7
right.
seconds. So Ed, you just got to take the ship here and take it wherever we go.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've got something to add to the conversation, and it's stuck with the technical difficulties.
It's tough here. I really apologize. It's extremely humid here in New Jersey today, so hence the technical difficulties. But I know we're talking about holy habits. We have been for the last few minutes, and I tell you what, it's been a plus for me. I've been using it ever since Jeff told me about it, and I do enjoy it. Well, I don't know if I should say I enjoy getting that text at the end of the day, because sometimes it's like, oh crap, I forgot to do everything. So, but that's good, because I've mentioned this on air before, is that when it comes to prayer life, I don't know if it's laziness or just getting caught up in everything else that goes on in the world. But I tend to, if I don't have things written down, if I don't have them in front of me, it's things slip by. I'll forget to do the daily rosary. I'll forget to do my morning prayers. I'll forget to do the office of the hours in the morning and things like that. And the next thing you know, unfortunately, it's 3, 4, 5 days down the road and you're really behind. And that's a dangerous place to be. You don't want to get into the position where you've gone several days of missing some or all of your prayers and some of your holy habits that you've developed. Because that's that doorway that gets open a little bit and then gets yanked open by the devil. He's more than happy to just come crawling right in there when you're in that particular situation. So I would have to say that app has helped me tremendously as far as keeping up to date and keeping going with my daily prayer life. And I would definitely recommend it to anyone and everyone who's interested in creating and maintaining holy habits. And you can't beat the price. I would say that for sure.
It's the same price as the best brand of booze, man. It's free.
Absolutely. No, I'm really thrilled to hear that. And I appreciate that, because I don't think you're saying it just to make me smile. I actually think that you mean it. So I thank you for that. I'm happy to hear the impact.
So
absolutely.
Before we totally wrap it up, we normally have an item from Ed's creepy basement. But I didn't realize exactly how far we were going to go into the rabbit hole and how in-depth your story was going to be. So we'll probably have to double up tomorrow, except we have Mike Pentile showing up on the show, so we can maybe double up, see if something in Ed's basement is relevant to his story. That would be a cool circle, full circle kind of thing that normally happens on the show. And we also don't have enough time to really go into the saint of the day, which is Saint Anthony of Padua. And I got to say, if there's anything I've always been curious about, what did Saint Anthony do to deserve a lifetime of looking for everyone's missing car keys? Right now, I know the true story. He had a text that went missing, and it was stolen by someone who had actually left the Order of Franciscans when he was there. And he prayed for the return. It showed up, but also the thief rejoined the order. That's how he became the patron saint of missing articles. But I really do wish we had more time to go into the full story because it's fascinating. Maybe I'll throw that out in tomorrow's newsletter for people who are interested. But for now, we're going to go ahead and close it up. And I usually give the pitch, but since we've got him here, I'm going to go ahead and let Drago make the case as for why you should follow the instructions on the screen and download Holy Habits.
Well, first, let me say thanks for having me. I'm sorry to have shifted the saint of the day because those are really insightful stories. So let's just say this as part of the pitch here. The saint of the day is the future version of you, the listener. You can be, what's your story going to be, and how are you going to be intentional about pursuing holiness and the path to sainthood? There's many ways to do it. We want to make it as easy as possible with Holy Habits to help you on the journey. And we're going to keep building it out. So frankly, if this is important to you, we want the feedback because we can together shape this app. And it's always going to be orthodox. We're not going to compromise, get into silly stuff, right? We're going to rely on the rich treasures of the church, the things that the saints that Jeff and Ed described all did, the types of focus and attention. So thank you very much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And you're welcome. And as usual, remember, it's free. It's on the Apple App Store and it's on Google Play. Download Holy Habits, check out the Holiness Hub, identify your root sin, get to the bottom of what you're really, really struggling with, dial in your strategy, and get that pathway to heaven started. Because as someone who both Ed and I are both a huge fan of, Father Larry Richardson of the parish out in Erie, Pennsylvania, or Larry Richards, not Richardson, he always says, you could be a saint or you can go to hell. But we'll wrap this one up. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. Drago, thank you for coming. And that's going to do it for today's episode.
Thank you very much.
God bless everyone.